Good evening, I'm Leanne Sanders. Welcome to APTN National News. As an out-of-control wildfire 15 kilometers outside of Yellowknife continues to threaten the capital city, cool weather and rain have helped over the weekend, but the empty city is still under siege. The fire, which is over 160 hectares in size, has been held at bay thanks to aerial support and rainfall over the last 72 hours. With winds today expected to push the fires west, no fires in the surrounding area are expected to progress significantly. But threat remains to Yellowknife due to deep burning fires along a huge section of line, which is currently being held down by weather conditions. There are currently over 230 active wildfires across the territory. Pauline Frost is the newly elected chief of Evacuations. She says people in Old Crow, Northwest Territories are returning home. On August 9th, evacuation orders were lifted last week, but the fly-in community is still under heavy smoke. Frost says as a leader, she has been in crisis situations before and was prepared for the evacuation of more than 120 residents.
I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and as a leader, but I have to say this is not the first time I've had to deal with something of this magnitude. So I was a Minister of Health and Social Services when COVID hit in January, I think mid-January. And the quick action of the government to respond to the crises and declaring a state of emergency and putting significant resources around the health emergency. At the same time, we were hosting the Arctic Winter Games, if you recollect, in Whitehorse, and which meant, of course, moving very, very quickly politically and putting things into action.
And over in Calgary, a single mother from Yellowknife was able to get her children and her mother safely out of the city. They're settled now, but getting a flight out was not easy.
Yeah, I mean, there was like no flights, and so we just kept hitting refresh and refresh and refresh, and finally there was one seat that opened up and I was able to get on it. You see, in Yellowknife, the smoke came in like a few days prior really bad, and the whole town was orange. And so when that happened, I just knew it wasn't good. And so I actually got my children and my mom out a day or two earlier.
Joining us now is our very own Cullen Crozier, the producer of APTN Investigates. He and his family are safe in Grand Prairie, Alberta. Hi, Cullen. Thanks for joining us tonight. Can you describe the evacuation from Yellowknife? Have fires ever threatened before?
Yeah, so as it stands right now, the evacuation order came down Wednesday evening, so 4 or 5 days ago. In that time, I, from what I hear, about 95% of the population of Yellowknife have evacuated. There's about 22,000 people for the population there. I think there's around anywhere from 1,000 to maybe 1,500 essential workers still in the city. Firefighters, military personnel, RCMP, healthcare workers, stuff like that. Community members who are actively, doing what they can to, help with the brakes and sprinkler systems and these preventative measures. From what I understand, the fire, the closest one is about 15 kilometers outside of the city. I think there's about 4 fires that they're actively fighting, so we're kind of surrounded kind of on all fronts there, the city. But the biggest one is about 15 kilometers outside of the city. They don't expect it to reach the outskirts of the city until Wednesday. There's basically been rain the last few days, a limited amount. The winds shifted in the favor of the city, and basically all of the work that they've been doing to actively fight the fire has helped a lot. Has anything like this happened before? Every year throughout the north, I mean, just because of where we live, there's forest fires. I mean, it happens every year. You know, it'll get really smoky in Yellowknife during this season, basically. But never has the fire got this close to the city. Never has Yellowknife had to be evacuated 22,000 people. So it's the first time in history it's happened.
Wow. How much notice were you and your family given?
Well, the evacuation, you know, there was the official order came down Wednesday evening at around 7:30, 8 p.m. Before that, we were on an evacuation alert. So, you know, people were getting the sense in the days leading up to the actual order that this was going to happen. I think a lot of us, you know, we had hoped for the best. We hoped it wouldn't happen, but people were actively getting prepared. But when the order came down, you know, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, it seemed to happen relatively quick. And, you know, basically my family and the little crew I was rolling with, we packed our bags and hit the highway at 11:30 p.m. that Wednesday. And it was just wall-to-wall traffic. So, I mean, like everybody, it was just a massive evacuation exodus from Yellowknife. So I don't know. I don't know how, if I'd say that was handled well, where it just seemed like everybody just, you know, got out of Dodge at the same time. And what you had was just a massive traffic jam in the only road leaving the city. You know, after that, I think it, you know, kind of thinned out a little bit. And, you know, obviously they had planes come in, evacuating people to Edmonton, Calgary. I think they're even evacuating some of the population to Winnipeg actually now as well. So yeah, that's basically that.
Where are you now, Cullen, and can you describe the scene for us there?
Yeah, well, my family, we drove to Grand Prairie, Alberta. It was about, let's say, about 12-hour drive from Yellowknife. I haven't really seen, we haven't hit up the evacuation center here yet. It's just kind of been about getting my family kind of settled where we are. So we haven't hit the evacuation center. I'm not really sure how many people from Yellowknife came to Grand Prairie specifically. I think a lot went to Edmonton, Calgary, the larger kind of urban centers. Yeah, so I'm not too sure exactly. I haven't seen anybody else from the north here yet, but they are here.
So how are you and your family coping with this disruption in your lives?
As best we can. You know, we have a few younger children with us, and it's just kind of finding stuff for them to do during the day. Obviously, you know, trying to work remotely as well from the road has its challenges. You know, we're doing it as best we can. We kind of lucked out with, you know, family member support systems that we had set in place here, and I think you'll find like a lot of the evacuees, the ones that could anyway, that's what they did. They leaned on, you know, family and loved ones and friends, and you know, the outpouring of support there has been overwhelming, and people opening up their homes, and that's, you know, that's what happened with us. We were lucky enough to have a house to go to here, family's house. So yeah, we're, you know, it's taking it day by day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for joining us, Cullen, and take care.
Thank you.
In British Columbia, a state of emergency remains in place as 386 wildfires burn across that province, hitting the West Kelowna and Shuswap regions hard. Thousands had to evacuate over the weekend as fires destroyed structures in the Okanagan Valley. Tamara Pimentel has more.
Over 27,000 people are under an evacuation order in British Columbia, and at least 50 structures have been destroyed by the wildfires in West Kelowna. In a news conference Monday morning, Okanagan Fire Chief Jason Brolin says that number is expected to rise as some of the worst hit areas have yet to be surveyed.
I described it as a hurricane. Trees pushed over by their roots. This is the kind of neighborhood that we're in today. So undoubtedly that number will grow higher. but it's difficult to tell because some of these areas are also the more rural and remote areas of the communities.
It was like a war zone. It just looked like something you'd watch on a movie.
Heading north into BC's Shuswap region, 2 fires have merged into one. The 41,000-hectare Bush Creek fire has destroyed homes and businesses in several communities. The federal government has approved BC's request for help, including assistance from the military and resources to help with evacuations. Firefighting equipment has gone missing in the Shuswap area. At least 15 sets of equipment containing pumps, hoses, and sprinklers have been reported stolen. Crews have had to replace gear 4 times in the last 2 days. Meanwhile, BC's Premier is calling on Meta to give Canadians access to news articles on Facebook and Instagram during this time of need.
I call on Facebook again. Mr. Zuckerberg, open up access to Canadian media so that British Columbians can share critical local information so they can be safe. It's incredibly frustrating to me that we have to be making this call at this stage in the crisis.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We have to take a break, but when we come back, we hear from a St. Anne's residential school survivor trying to secure documents and a meeting with the Pope in Rome. Welcome back. Minnegozibi Anishinaabe, historically known as the Pine Creek First Nation in Manitoba, has released the results of an excavation in the basement of a Roman Catholic church. The excavation was initiated earlier this summer after ground-penetrating radar had twice detected 14 reflections underneath the church. On the weekend, Chief Derek Nepanak announced via social media that a search found no conclusive evidence of human remains. Nepanak says he knows the work will feed into a denialist narrative, but he says the work there should be compared to other searches taking place around other residential schools in Canada.
We know from the living memory of our elders who attended the school, as well as the living memory of those who have been passed the stories of their ancestors' experiences in the school, that horrible things happened there. Resultantly, it was appropriate for us to prepare for the worst possible results of an excavation under the church. The results of the excavation take nothing away from the difficult truths experienced by our families who attended the residential school in Pine Creek.
Next month, Evelyn Korkmas will be part of a group of residential school survivors traveling to Rome. It's part of an effort to get a meeting with Pope Francis and gain access to unreleased residential school records. The group will make stops in Geneva and The Hague. Korkmas, a survivor of St. Anne's Residential School in Northern Ontario, she joined Daryl Stranger recently to talk about the upcoming trip.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. First off, can you tell our viewers a little bit about your upcoming trip and maybe how it all came about?
Well, I'm planning to go to Rome at the end of September with a group that I helped co-found called Ending Clergy Abuse. It's an international organization that represents 28 countries who have been affected by, obviously, clergy abuse. And we plan to go to Rome. When the Pope came to Canada, I presented him with an empty box, asking him to put the residential school documents in there and to send it back to Canada where the documents belong. This is our history. They don't belong in Rome. Mm-hmm. So since he hasn't done that, I plan to go and ask him during a press conference to meet with me again and to hand over the documents.
Well, Evelyn, do you think you'll be able to get a meeting with the Pope? Is that maybe one part of the trip that you're hoping to do?
Yes, I would like a private meeting with him like I had here in Canada. And I just, want to know what the hesitation is, why, he's not sending these documents, to Canada and handing them over to, to the survivors. So we will know our history. We will know the names of the people that are buried in these unmarked graves across Canada. These families that have missing children that had gone to residential school deserve closure. Every human being deserves closure and to be able to move on with their life. Yeah. And I don't think that's, too big of a request to ask, I don't know. Yeah, there's a few questions I would like to ask him, is like, I'd like to know how many, bishops, priests, nuns were not brought to justice due to the cover-up of the Vatican. Mm-hmm. Because this is an epidemic that is happening around the world. It's not just in Canada, obviously, when I said that ECA represents 28 countries, So it's a global epidemic, Yeah. And if clergy abuse is not, handled, it's just going to continue. Mm-hmm. somebody has to do something and say enough is enough, and this has to end, and you need to be held accountable. You can't go around, ruining our children's lives just because you belong to a religious institute.
Yeah.
They've lost their moral compass, and and people like me and other survivors around the world need to put them back where the gauge belongs.
So, Evelyn, are you hoping this will put more pressure on the government and the Catholic Church to release the documents that both of the institutions hold?
Yes, Canada keeps saying that they don't have documents, but recently the former Indigenous Minister Mark Miller found another 200 boxes or 90,000 documents. So if the government doesn't have them, how does this minister find them, has possession of them? So obviously, if he can find these documents, there are other documents elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't understand why, too, that the Canadian government released the Catholic Church from their obligations to pay $30 million to the residential school survivors for the healing that they, have done to our people. The Indian residential school settlement agreement was signed, sealed. They don't have Canada does not have the right to release these people. That's illegal. You can't change a contract once it's signed and, by all three parties. You can't go around and change it.
Well, Evelyn,
they had no right to release the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm. Evelyn, we'll have to leave it there, but we certainly do appreciate you coming on and sharing a bit of details about your trip with us. Safe travels, certainly. And again, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's time for another short break, but we will be back with details about artifacts that stopped work at Vancouver Airport. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. This was sent in by Sharon Oski. Sharon was out hoping to see a bear along the Skeena River between Prince Rupert and Terrace, British Columbia, but instead she got this great photo of a juvenile bald eagle. Thanks for sharing, Sharon. We want to see your pictures, so send them to share@aptn.ca and you might be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. On the East Coast, we have St. John's at 19, Fredericton is 22. Tujuak is 15, and Happy Valley Goose Bay 18. In Quebec, we've got Chibougamau at 20, Rouyn-Noranda at 24. Sarnia 24 and London 24. Cape Escasing is 25 and Thunder Bay 19. Thompson and Puckatawagan at 25, The Pas 21. In Manitoba, we've got 19 in Dauphin for tomorrow and 22 in Winnipeg. Saskatchewan will see 18 in Saskatoon and 27 in Estevan. Uranium City 24 and Stony Rapids 25. Heading west, we've got Fort Chip at 26 and Grand Prairie at 23. Further south, Edmonton is 22 and Calgary 19. In British Columbia, 22 in Bella Coola and Quesnel. And heading further north, Dease Lake will be 24 tomorrow and Fort Nelson 25. In the Northwest Territories, Old Crow 17, Dawson and Mayo 21 tomorrow. Wrigley will be 20 and Fort Liard 23. Tuktoyaktuk 16 and Colville Lake 16. Cambridge Bay will be 9 and Baker Lake 17. And in Nunavut, we've got Iqaluit at 8 tomorrow and Pangertung at 9. Construction at the Vancouver International Airport has been suspended until further notice after airport crews found what are believed to be Musqueam artifacts earlier this month. The presumed artifacts are described as stone implements and bone fragments of birds and other mammals. The ancient tools and fossils have been sent to a certified archaeology heritage lab for authentication. Depending on the lab's findings, the artifacts will either be stored, preserved, or returned to the Musqueam before construction resumes. The Vancouver Airport is located on Musqueam territory. Musqueam Chief Wayne Sparrow says the band is working closely with airport representatives to make sure things are done correctly. That's our show for this Monday evening. Thanks for joining us.